Okay, so question is it possible to do not a timed input, but a timed output, so something that's printed for a while and then erases itself? I think we can probably do that. Print. Okay. See how this works. Okay. 2, 3, there we go. So, so you print without doing a new line. That's what this first thing does. So this is just 4 lines of code that I compressed together. So you print avoiding the new line. That's what this comma does. On some systems, this means you need to flush the output, because typically print statements only occur at the end of every line. That's what this does. So these first 2 statements print hello world. This next one sleeps for 5 seconds. And then this one prints the carriage return and then 50 white spaces. This, you'd have to try it under different Windows terminals. Should work under Mac OS. Definitely works under Linux, and I think it may depend on exactly which Windows terminal and version you're using. Try it and see. It's pretty good.
Whereas I spent like 5 hours trying to figure this out, and it was like 3 seconds just on.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So that's I don't know. That's a common thing. You know. One day you'll be able to do everything in 3 seconds also. So, you know. Yep.
Is there a way to freeze raw input? Say there's a timer sleep, and then you don't want anybody to type into the command. You want to freeze that.
Again, there's no good cross-platform way to prevent someone from typing stuff in while your program is sleeping and then having that entered later. So for example, let's sleep for 10 seconds. If I sleep for 10 seconds and then say s equals raw input sum, and then I say print s. So I'm sleeping for 10 seconds. I enter some stuff. I press enter, still asleep. And that stuff gets read in by the raw input. There's no easy way to stop that. Again, I know there are solutions for every individual operating system, but if you wanted something that works across all OSs, you'll have a difficulty doing it. Yep.
Does that mean that if someone can input into our program while we're making it do stuff on the screen and it crashes it or something, we fail?
Well, so one thing that you don't have to do, for example, is the user is always free to press Control-C, which will almost surely interrupt your program. So you don't have to deal with those kinds of nasty, don't have to worry about those kinds of nasty things. But basically, you should be able to handle input which is invalid. So if you ask someone for an integer and they enter something that's not an integer, you should deal with that in a graceful way. But this...
Like if they do something that's like, imagine it's running something and then they're putting in words, and then when they put it out, I don't know what happens.
Well, so when you finally read those words, either they'll be valid input or not, and if they're not, then you should do the right thing for invalid input. Okay. Any other questions? So, yeah. So you know, there's two ways to do time. So you can display stuff for a limited amount of time as this, using this little trick of going back and erasing stuff, or you can do this timed raw input that I gave you. It's not the nicest thing, but it, you know, it works well enough, and the people testing your program aren't going to punish you because that's not perfect. That aspect isn't perfect. Yeah.
Is the semicolon just a way of avoiding going on a new line?
Yeah, semicolon basically says, pretend that this line is over, and the next statement is like it's on a whole new line. You hardly ever use them in Python, except when I want to do quick things like this. Okay. All right. So today's the 25th. It's the afternoon. Okay, so again, we're not going to learn really any new, any big new concepts in terms of the Python language. We're still looking at applying these in creative ways. So today I want to do this by developing another game that'll have some, to implement it, we'll have some problems we have to solve. And this game is, well, so where does it come from? When I taught this course last year, I searched around and looked for trivia questions online. It turns out that they were actually, it's quite hard to get a good database of trivia questions. So unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but eventually I caved in and spent $10 to get a list of trivia questions. And so, you know, when I did that, I used my PayPal account, bought this list, and this this guy sent me this big list of questions. So there's 646 questions there. We'll look at the format in a second. And this was just from some online place that specializes in pub trivia, a British company. So what do I get? I get this big file. And what's in this file? Well, it's in CSV format. Anybody heard of this before? Yeah. So anybody know what CSV stands for? Yeah. Yeah, so CSV stands for comma separated values, and it's typically a spreadsheet format or a tabular format. So if you think of a spreadsheet, each row of the spreadsheet is on its own line in this file, and each line has a bunch of fields. Think of those as the individual cells in that row, and those fields are separated with a special character. So the fields are called the values, and then there's a separator, a special character between them. So CSV stands for comma separated value, where that character is a comma, but actually there's many different kinds of CSVs for different, that use different separators. And if we look at this one, so let's, probably the best thing we can do is open it in Python. It's already online. It's already in the code samples, and now so when you see this little right up here, sometimes you see this thing pop up that says some file was updated on Ubuntu 1. that's the file that I'm working on that's being uploaded to the website that contains all the samples. So those samples are available almost as soon as I press save, including this CSV file. Okay, so we open this thing. So there's F. What's F? It's an open file called quiz.csv. What do we do with files typically? Yeah, usually we read them. So let's say questions is equal to f.read. So what's questions then? Yeah, when we read a file, we get the whole thing. So 643 questions, just a wall of text. It's all one string. So that's not that useful. So I said basically CSV is a format where you have one row per line. So what should we do with this thing next? Do we want to strip the new lines? Yeah. So the new lines tell us basically how to break this up into individual questions. And if we look, if we use our friend Google and we say something like Python string split lines, since that's what we want to do, split lines, maybe lines. We find that there is a method for strings that's called split lines that actually does what we want. And we takes an optional Boolean argument that that tells us whether or not we want to keep the carriage returns at the end of the lines. So sounds like what we want to do is say A is equal to questions dot split lines. So now if we look at A, indeed it's an array with 646 elements, and if we look at the elements, each element is a line in that file. Okay. So looking at these lines, you know, I said CSV is basically a bunch of fields, and between each field there's a special character separating them. So what does it look like the special character is here? Tab, right? There's these \T's that show up, and so it looks like that's basically the character that separates these things. So let's take a closer look at one of these, maybe A at 0. And again, if we go back and look at this string methods, splitting strings is a pretty common operation. We've done it before. We see that there is actually a method called split. In fact, there's several versions of it, split, split lines, and others. And split says, well, we take a string and we can get a list of the words in the string using sep as the delimiter. Okay, and sep is the argument. So we seem to think that if we call a0.split, and the delimiter we want is a tab. So then indeed, we get an array. Looks like the 0th element in that array is a question, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 possible answers, then something that looks like maybe a category, and finally an integer that it's not clear what that is yet.
Yeah.
So that's the correct answer. So the conjecture is that that's the correct answer. Let's see here. How many cups of tea does the average English person drink a day? Is the correct answer 2? Okay, so the conjecture now is that that's the question number. So let's check that on another one. No, there's 2 again, so it's not unique. Yep.
Out of the 5 answers it gives you, it denotes which answer is correct.
Yeah.
So,
The second answer is correct.
so the average Frenchman eats 1 frog per year. I wouldn't know. Let's test that on another one. Okay, what's the newest Smarties color? Anybody know the answer to that? Let's Google. Colors. So Wikipedia can tell us just about everything we want to know. That doesn't help us though. So I know the answer. Well, at least I know the correct answer at the time this list of questions was created, and the correct answer then was blue. So that sort of goes against this thing being the right thing. And by looking at this for a while, I've sort of figured out what this last column is. It seems to be the difficulty of the question. So if we look at these, what's the main ingredient, solid ingredient in alphabet soup? That's kind of an easy question. It's pasta, right? Those little alphabet, those little letters are made of pasta. How many cups of tea does the average Englishman drink per day? I don't know, whatever. Nor do I know how many frogs an average Frenchman eats in a year. But I do know that the most recent Smarties color was blue. And we can take a look at another one. But that's a harder, so those are somehow harder questions. Which island is also the name of an orange liquor? What is it? Curacao. So it's interesting. It's an orange flavored liqueur, but it's actually usually blue, blue curacao. So that's the correct answer in that case. And actually, if you go through a few of these questions, ones that we know the answer to, anybody speak Czech here? Anybody know enough to order a beer in the Czech Republic? Yeah. So how do you say beer in Czech? So I knew this one even before I went there. Pivo is the correct answer. Oh, sorry, the pivo is the, sorry, got that wrong. The correct answer is the Czech Republic. The pivo is the question. I'm not playing Jeopardy. So what would indicate that a French wine is sweet? Do soft, not crazy, not drunk. So actually, if you look at enough of these, you'll soon realize that the answer is always the first one. The correct answer is always the first one. So that's something we'll have to deal with. Okay, but we know enough about this file now to get started making our game. And let's call this quizgame.py. So we want to stick with our strategy of not writing a ton of code at once, and always having code that works as much as possible. So so there we've started our quiz game. We have working code, so that's good. And we've just looked at how we can open this file and do what we want with it, or get it into manageable, useful pieces. So let's say we want to load the questions from some file, and we say we want to open that file, we want to read it. That gives us a string that we want to split into lines. And now what do we want to do? So now we have an array of lines in this file. What do we want from this? So what should we do next?
Is that the question?
What's that?
Is that the question?
Well, we haven't really got the file yet into a usable format. So now we have this array. It has a list of lines. Yeah.
You want to split it up into an array.
Yeah, so we'd like to go through each line in this file that we've just loaded. We've got that now. That's what's stored in A. And we'd like to split that up into its parts. So the first part being the question, then the 4 answers, so 1 correct answer and 3 incorrect answers, then the category, and then the difficulty. And so we can do this. So to split an individual line, we know how to do that. We call split, right? That splits the line up at all the tab characters. That gives us an array. And we want to do that for every line in A, this array. And maybe A is not a nice name. Let's call it lines. Okay. And now so let's test this. Oh, that's not all I want to do. I want to actually return this. So our game, prints this message. That's all I implemented. It loads the questions, but then it's over. Let's just see that this load questions thing does what we want. Load questions from quiz.csv. So questions is now an array with 646 elements in it, and each of those elements is itself an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements in it. Okay, so that's questions at 0, questions at 1, questions at 2, questions at 3. So if I write some expression like questions at 3 at 0, what's that? Yeah.
Third question, first element, so that would mean like it would only be the question.
Yeah. So questions at 3 is the third question, and well, that itself is an array, and the 0th element of that is the first one, which is this thing here. Okay, so that's a string. That's the question we have there. Okay, so there's your first lesson for today. Arrays can be what are called two-dimensional or multi-dimensional, And in Python, the way that that's, and in many other languages, the way that that's implemented is it's basically just an array that contains arrays. And if you want to go beyond two-dimensional, those arrays can contain other arrays and so on. But 2 dimensions is good enough for now. And we can think of this, the way that you think of a spreadsheet. The first index tells you which row, and then the second index tells you which column. So we have this big 2-dimensional array with 640 something rows and 7 columns. Okay, so is that part clear? Okay, good. So we've got this code that works, that loads a list of questions. So keeping with this idea that we want to just keep adding features, always keeping a game that works, what's the next sort of feature we can add, something that we can't avoid? So, yeah. Yeah, so probably we need to print a question. Before we can ask someone to answer it, we need it to be printed. So let's define a function called, I don't know, display question. And we'll start by displaying the 0th question. Okay, so how do we implement this? So Q now is an individual question, which means that it's actually an array that has this form here, has 7 elements. So what should we do? Yeah. So we can print Q at 0. That prints the question. We can check that. Okay, so there's the question, got printed. Good. What should we print next? Yeah. The answers. So the answers will, let's say, use a for loop. And so we're going to have an index that's going to iterate over the indices of the answers in this array. So where are the answers to the question? What are the indices? 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? 0 is the question itself. The 4 choices for answers are at positions 1 through 4. So we can say for I in range, so what range would we use to go from 1 through 4? 1, 5. So we start at 1 and we stop before we get to 5. So we stop at 4. And then we can print, maybe we'll put something like the number of the answer and the answer itself. So that's I and the question at index I. Let's test that. So there's the question, and there's the 4 choices for answers. If we want to get fancy, we can do print a little bit of information about the question. We could say difficulty and category. So and where are those stored? So those are stored at positions, I think, 5 and and 6. So categories food and drink, difficulty is 1. Okay, so now we can, we've got our game to the point where we display a question. What next? Yeah.
Create an array with some random numbers, like from 1 to 4, so that not always the answer is in the first option.
Okay, so we somehow would like to not always present the question answers in this order. And that's because, well, if we do that, anybody playing the game is quickly going to catch on that, that 1 is always the correct answer. So that'll make it less interesting. But that sounds complicated, and we'll see that it is a little bit of work to do. So if we want to just stick with the strategy of making something that always works and adding features, so I don't know. Right now it seems more important to me that somebody gets a chance to answer a question than it does for us to randomize the answers. So I think maybe the next thing we should do is read an answer. Okay, so how do we read answers? Yep. Okay. So we're asking for something like this. So we'll prompt them, not 5, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we'll read that. Now we're going to convert that to an int. Probably is more useful because more useful than a string. Is this a good method? No. So what's wrong with it? What could go wrong?
Yeah, a letter.
You could input a letter, in which case converting to an int will crash. You could input the number 42, in which case converting to an int won't crash, but it's not really one of the valid options. So we'd like to do some error checking here. So one thing that we should maybe do is, and it's a good general rule, when you accept input from a user, you almost always want to strip it, meaning you'd like to take white space, any white space that's at the beginning and any white space that's at the end, and get rid of it. So, so if the user presses space 4 or space 4 space space tab, then really all we care about is the 4 in that input. So we'll strip that. Fine. And now what do we want to check after we've stripped all the white space? What should we be looking for?
You try and accept it just like a type error.
So we can use a try and catch errors when we convert to ints, but maybe we can prevent those entirely. Because even if we have, if we don't have an error converting to an int, that doesn't mean it's valid input, right? Because somebody enters 5, that's not an input we're willing to accept, but it converts to an int, no problem.
You can have a while loop
Yeah.
that does while true, or while answer is not equal to any of those.
Okay. So while answer is not equal to any of those 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that would be while not answer is in 1, 2, 3, or 4. So here we can just we can list out the possible answers. Since there's only 4, we'll list them out explicitly. So answer in 1, 2, 3, or 4 will return true if answer is one of these strings and false otherwise. Well, we want to continue as long as that's false. So as long as the answer is not in this set. And if the answer is not in that set, maybe we'll print some error message, invalid response. Try again. And then repeat. Okay. So we prompt them, we take their answer, we check if it's one of the valid answers. If not, and as long as it's not, we keep doing that over and over again. Okay. So that's already getting to be a lot of code. We better test it. And what was that called? Input answer? Input. And we return this thing converted to an int. Good. So let's test this. So if I try and put in something that's not an integer, it says it's an invalid response. If I put in a 9, that's also an invalid response. If I put in a 3, it completes. Yep.
You're taking answer as an integer, but you're trying to compare it to an array of strings containing 1, 2, 3, and 4.
At this point, what does raw input give me? So raw input returns a string. I do change it into an integer only after I've checked that it's one of those strings, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'm returning this thing is returning an integer. So at this point, this variable is an integer value. Okay. All right. So we printed the question. We asked for an answer. What next? We should check if it's correct. So when is it correct? What's the correct answer? And otherwise, so we want to display the correct answer. What is it?
Well, for now, it's always going to be 1.
It's Q at 1. Forgot a colon. Okay, so we've already tested that our input routine correctly checks for invalid inputs, so let's try a wrong answer. Potato is a wrong answer, and we get a big crash. It says wrong, the correct answer was %s Q at 1. Global name Q is not defined. And indeed, there's no variable named Q in this function. Maybe we should do that. There's Q. All right, wrong answer is potato, and it says wrong. The correct answer was pasta. Good. So that works in case of a wrong answer, and in case of a right answer, it tells me that I'm correct. Okay. Now what? What's the next feature we should add? The next question. So we would like to actually repeatedly ask questions, right? So a quiz game, it's nice to get asked one question, but maybe the game should continue. So for that, we'll want a while loop. And for now, we'll let the game run forever. Okay.
Didn't you just say like
Wrong, wrong, right, right, right. Okay, this is an easy game. So what should we do? So now we have this thing repeatedly asks questions, but there's something clearly annoying about it or uninteresting about it, and it's the fact that it asks the same question over and over again. So how do we fix that? Yeah.
By either randomly picking a question or running.
Yeah, so we could go through the list of questions one by one, starting at question 0, and then on to question 1, and question 2, and question 3, and so on. I think that's probably less interesting because then every time you play the game, you get the same list of questions. And so eventually then the game becomes about memorizing a sequence of answers. If you play it repeatedly, it's probably more interesting to pick random questions each time. So again, we use Google. We start a query for Python and search random choice or just random. Both of them will take us to the information we want eventually. Well, I'll tell you what we'll learn from Google if we actually had a decent internet connection. That I can, in the random module, there's a function called random.choice. You give it a list, and it gives you a random choice from that list. Okay. So we give it the list of questions as an argument, and it'll pick one at random for us. And of course, then we'll want to import random. Let's test that. Good. There's a new question. Cliff Richard was born in which country? Yeah. Geez, you guys are good. How did you know that? What kills the aliens in the film Evolution? Anti-dandruff shampoo. Okay, good. So now we're getting different questions every time. And it's correctly telling us whether the answers are right or wrong. But it's still kind of boring. Yeah. So we don't avoid repeating a question. We just hope that because we have enough questions, 640 of them, that it'll be quite a while before we repeat them. It actually won't be that long, but that's another story. Yeah. You could delete questions that you ask. Alternatively, instead of always picking a random question, you could shuffle the list of questions and then go through them one by one. Then you'd be visiting them in a random order. A few ways to do it, but for now, let's just leave it at picking a random one. But again, there's a bigger issue here, and that's that if you play this game even for a short period of time, you will realize that the correct answer is always 1. So we'd like to fix that, and that's where we'll have to do a little bit of work. So what do we have? We have this question, and the question is just an array, and the integers, the array elements at positions 1, 2, 3, and 4 are answers, and 1 is always the right answer. So what we'd like to do is maybe present all those answers to the user, but in a different order. Okay? So again, the random module helps us with this. So let's go into Python again and experiment. So let's make, so those are the indices of the potential answers, right? 1, 2, 3, or 4. So we can get those by making the range 1 through 5. And in random, there's a function called shuffle that takes a list, and if you import random, it takes a list and shuffles it. And shuffles it. So 1 out of every 24 times you'll get the same list back, but 23 out of 24 times you should get a different list back. So shuffle, look at it, there we get the same list back. So we noticed some weirdness with this morning, that you frequently get the same list appearing, but it's supposed to work well. We'll use it and assume that it works well enough for this game. As long as nobody's betting money on it, we should be safe. So we can take these indices 1 through 4 and shuffle them. So let's do that. So we pick a random question. We say P is equal to range 1 through 5. That's these indices. And we will call random.shuffle on P. So now I want to show the question to the user. And for example, if P is 3, 4, 1, 2, then that's the way I want to show the answers. So I want to show the third answer first, then the fourth answer, then the first answer, then the second answer. So display question, we'll make it take P as an argument, so the ordering on the answers. And okay, so now we're going to display the answers. So we want I to iterate over the indices of P. P has 4 elements in it, so it's indexed by 0, 1, 2, and 3. And we want to show that to the user. So we'll print I, and we'll print Q at what? Q at P at I. Right? Before we used to print Q at 1, Q at 2, Q at 3, Q at 4, always in that order. Now we want them to be printed in a different order, and the order is determined by P at I. So, right, P at 0 will print the third answer, P at 1 will print the fourth answer, P at 2 will print the first answer, and P at 3 will print the second answer. And we have to get used to the fact that now our indexing is a little bit different. So people, when they're given choices, they like their choices to be 1, 2, 3, 4, but internally our arrays are indexed 0, 1, 2, 3, so we have to do a little conversion here. And so when we're showing the ith element of P, we display that as I plus 1. So let's check that out. Okay, well, and maybe for debugging this, we'll take a step backwards, and rather than always asking a random question, we'll ask one we know the answer to. Okay, so there's that first question again, and now the answers are displayed: egg, rice, potato, pasta. So let's take a wild guess. And now, same question again, but the answers are displayed: potato, egg, rice, pasta. So in a different order. And same order again. For some reason, this shuffle method is not great at giving us really random things. Oh well. Different order, different order. So the different orders seem to keep coming up. Okay. So in this question that we're presented with right now, what's the correct answer? 4. So let's put in 4. Oh, says that it's wrong. Well, why does it say that it's wrong? Well, because if we go and look at our code, the way we check if the answer is correct is we ask if it's equal to 1. So, how do we know now if the answer is correct?
It's equal to the cube 1 or something.
So this will be confusing, so maybe we should draw a picture. So we have this array that has these 4 numbers in it, so this array P. And it's indexed by 0, 1, 2, 3. And it has the integers in some order. They've been shuffled. Well, maybe the integers in P are in that order. And so when we show the question to the user, we show them the second answer is option 1 for them. So the second answer inside the question is option 1. The first answer inside the question is displayed as option 2. The fourth answer inside the question is displayed as option 3. And the third one is displayed as option 4. So this is maybe we'll use a better color. This is the index in the question Q. So that's the index into those answers. This is what the user sees. And chooses from. So the user is supposed to enter an integer between 1 and 4. And this is the index in this permutation array P. So in this case, what's the correct, for this permutation array, what's the correct answer for the user? So the right thing the user should do, the correct thing for the user to do, is to input 2 in this case. So let's see. If the user inputs 2, well, that really means that the index in the array here is 1. Okay, so if the user inputs answer, then really internally this is answer minus 1. And we look at P at that location. So if the user inputs 2, we look at P at 1. And what's the clue that tells us that that's correct? So how do we know that this is correct? How did you know that this was the correct choice? Because the answer is 1. And inside the question, the correct answer is always 1. So our answer is correct if and only if the answer that we're given, we subtract 1, we look at what's stored in P there, that should be equal to 1. It's the first answer that's listed in the question. Okay. So let's see if we work through the logic correctly. And the answer, well, I can tell you we didn't. Okay, so what's the correct answer here? 4. So it tells me that is correct. Good. Yes. Yeah, no, that's correct. Okay, good. So that's correct. Let's try a wrong answer. What's a wrong answer? 2. Wrong. The correct answer was pasta. Good. So it still displays the correct answer, but identifies when I enter the wrong answer. 2 is still incorrect. 2 is still incorrect. Still incorrect. And 3 is correct. So good. This seems to work. It looks like we got the logic all right. We reasoned through this properly. Okay, so back now to not asking the same question over and over. We'll go back to picking random questions. And there's a couple of little touch-ups here, just in terms of playability. So one thing that I don't know, we can play this, but personally I find it disconcerting that when I answer the question, so for example, that immediately I'm presented with a new question, and if I want to know if my answer was correct or not, I have to somehow look up there. So maybe we could make this a little nicer by doing something like putting a little bit of space here and giving the user some time to read the answer. So there's this time module, and it includes a method called sleep, which basically says do nothing for some number of seconds. So we'll let the user, once we've shown them whether their answer was correct or not, give them 1.5 seconds to digest it. Okay, which band was not a trio? Cream is not a trio? Wrong. The Kinks was not a trio. What was Agent Mulder's first name in the X-Files? Any X-Files fans? Fox Mulder. And good. See, we get some feedback, and then we move on to the next question. Yeah. Which band had an instrumental hit with Telstar? No idea. The Tornadoes. Which Bond actor tries to kill Her Majesty in the film Elizabeth? Correct. So whoever answers the loudest is the one I'll choose, or sounding the most confident. Dustin Hoffman played the frightened character Babe Levy in Tootsie? Wrong. Marathon Man. Which was a hit for the Mamas and the Papas? Monday. Okay. So this seems to be working well. So what features of a game could we add now? So now we actually have something that's sort of working. Yeah. Score.
Also lives.
Score and lives. So let's do lives first. So start with 3 lives and you get to play now, not forever, but only as long as you have some lives left. And if you get the answer wrong, you lose a life, and you get told how many lives you have left. We can test that quickly. We'll get lots of wrong answers. Davey, Peter, Michael, and Mickey. Which actor played John McClane in Die Hard? That's easy. That's supposed to be an old question for you guys, but they've made so many Die Hards now that even young people know. Okay, who had a colorful hit with Roses Are Red? Bobby Vinton? Correct. Boo is a character in which? Monsters Inc. Yep.
It's always one.
Well, let's see. Is it the answer always one? Wrong. You live only twice. Oh, percent D, lives remaining. We forgot to, and that's why we debug. So let's test again. The vehicle driven by the Munsters. Munsters Mobile? Nope.
Two.
Yep. What color is Spock's blood? Green. Who had a hit with Those Were the Days? Nobody's confident, so that's wrong. Who sang the Bond theme song License to Kill? Wrong. No lives remaining, and that's the end of the game. So now we don't have to apologize at the end of the game. We can say, game over. You, what? Lose? Lose. Win. Whatever. You don't win. Okay, and the other question, the other suggestion was we implement a score. Starts at 0 every time you get a question right.
Can increase based on the difficulty of the question.
Okay, so we can do scores based on the difficulty of the question. So let's go 1,000 times, and what's the difficulty? I think it's at 6. So big, tough questions give you bigger score. So tough one, except we've seen it before. Yeah, maybe we should. It's recorded, but then you never get to see it. So print, score. So if we want to, maybe we just want to do something like this. Whether you get it right or wrong will lives. But now we have a question we don't know the answer to. Yep.
You're saying that the score multiplier right now is a string.
Ah, good catch. So, well, anybody know the answer to this one so we can expose this bug? We'll guess. There we go. We guessed right, and then we get a crash. Unsupported operand types for plus equals, int and string. So we have an int on the left-hand side, that's the score, and then we have a string on the right-hand side. So that's 1,000 times this q at 6, but remember q, our question is just an array of strings. So we'd like to convert that to an int. Okay, what do you play at Devonshire Park? Football, tennis, cricket, or rugby? Somebody said rugby, sounded confident, but shouldn't have been. How many Oscars did Ben-Hur receive? 11. That's a lot of Oscars. Nigel Benn defeated, well, which boxer defeated Nigel Benn twice in 1996? Roy Jones? Wrong. In which country was snooker invented? See, I would have thought England, but it's not an option. Someone rise above and say it louder. South Africa. Wrong. So we finished with 200 and no lives remaining. We didn't win.
Yeah, saying that you didn't win implies there's a way to win.
Yeah, and there is no way to win, but
You can't win.
yeah, okay. That's a.
There we go.
Or you can make it ambiguous and say you'll never win. So then they don't know if you're teasing them, calling them stupid, or just stating a fact. Anything else we could get from this game or add to this game? So what do games typically do that this one doesn't? Yeah. Print the final score. So that we can fix. So we print the final score. But what else is sort of a feature of most video games that this one doesn't have?
Time limit?
Time limit. So we could put in a time limit, and we have a recipe for that. We use time draw input that we saw before. Yeah. What's that?
Play again.
Play again. That's an option. So for that, I might do something like while so there's a play again feature. So, I keep accidentally getting the right answer. Okay, game over, you'll never win. Play again, yes or no? Yes, and I get to play again. You might want to do something a little bit nicer than, a little bit more robust than this. If the player hits anything other than a lowercase y, this will assume he doesn't want to play again, but that's some polishing work. Anything else? Yeah?
I just have a question. You said that you can end the program whenever you want with Control-C.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we don't have to implement a way for the player to quit the game? Like have a quit function?
Yeah, don't bother implementing any way of, you don't need to have a way of quitting the game. Very often those things are external anyway, so sometimes you close the window that the game is in, or you you press some magic button on the controller or something, but you don't have to do that. So maybe the one feature we can add, because it only takes a few seconds, is we should maybe not start by asking hard questions, or we should avoid hard questions early on. Start with only the easy ones. So any idea how we do that? So maybe we should have something like a level, and say that that's equal to 1 plus score divided by, I don't know, 3,000. So you get 3 questions right, you go up a level. Sounds reasonable. And I never want to go beyond level 3 because I don't have any questions that are more difficult than difficulty 3. Okay, so then we pick this random question, and we would like it to have the same difficulty as the level you're on. So how can we guarantee that? Yeah. It means take the minimum of the 2 arguments. So if you get a really high score so that your level, this calculation says something like 50, I still don't want that to be more than 3 because I don't have any questions that are more difficult than level 3. So any idea how we assure that we get a question that's at the right level? Yeah.
You just put if the question that's on, and then you do 6.
Yeah.
And then equals 1 or level.
Yeah.
Then you would continue on. If not, you would randomly get a new question.
Okay. So yeah.
Well, questions is an array, right? So couldn't you just say questions and then like with instead of well, just then put wait, no, because that was
So there's a few things you could do. One, you could pre-sort the questions in these and group them into the easy ones, the hard ones, and so on. But there's actually a simple technique called rejection, which is well, you just pick a random question, and as long as so the difficulty was at position 6, as long as the level is not equal to the difficulty, what should we do? So this says we picked a question, but it's at the wrong level of difficulty. Just pick a different question. And with that, we see the first question ends up having difficulty 1. Rolling Stones first hit number 1 in the UK. Wrong. That didn't seem like an easy one to me, but according to this, it's difficulty 1. Which series of films do you associate the phrase "ooh, matron"? Wayne's World? Nope. Carry on. We're really bad at these. What was the hit for Falco? Rock Me Amadeus. Good. Still at level 1. Cruella de Vil is from 101 Dalmatians. So we got 2 correct, but we're still at level 1. And the police was da 1. Correct. And now we're at difficulty level 2 because our score is up to 3,000. And this one, actually, do you know the answer? A helper in the film industry is a grip or a gaffer? Lucky. Roses Are Red was whose song? I think we saw the answer to this already. 3. Wrong. And now we have a chance to play again. Okay, so we'll leave it at there for today.